You know that feeling when you dig into a perfect plate of pasta? Or those impossibly fluffy mashed potatoes? Or a warm, chewy slice of bread? That incredible comfort comes from some seriously cool science. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on how heat and water work their magic on one single powerful ingredient that makes it all happen.
So what is this secret ingredient, this unsung hero that's behind the texture and structure of so many of our favorite foods all over the world? Come on, you've probably got a pretty good idea what it is, right?
You got it. It's starch.
This incredibly common ingredient is a total powerhouse. And here's the thing, once you understand how it actually works, you can totally level up your cooking. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, first things first. What exactly is starch when we get right down to it?
Well, in the simplest terms, starch is just how plants store their energy. Think of it like a plant's battery pack. It's a complex carbohydrate made of these long glucose chains, amylose and amylopectin, if you want to get technical. For us in the kitchen, this battery pack is what thickens our sauces, gives bread its structure, and creates those amazing textures in pasta and potatoes. Now, here's where it gets really fun. Starch isn't static. It undergoes two major and pretty much opposite transformations. And knowing these is going to change the way you cook. First up is what's called gelatinization. Honestly, you can just think of this as the magic of cooking. When you take those tiny, hard starch granules and add heat and water, they start to wake up. They absorb water, they swell, they get soft. And this is literally what turns a hard piece of pasta into a tender noodle. So let's break that down. Once you hit about 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, those little granules start acting like tiny sponges, soaking up all the water around them. They just swell, and as they do, the liquid they're in gets thicker. It's exactly how a little bit of flour and butter can thicken up a whole pot of gravy. It's all gelatinization. But what happens when everything cools down? Well, that's when you get the opposite reaction, retrogradation. You can basically call this the science of staling. See, after those starch molecules have swollen up, they start to cool down and rearrange themselves. They line back up, get organized, and in the process, they squeeze out water. This is exactly why day-old bread gets firm and dry. Fun fact though, gently warming it up can break up some of those bonds and make it soft again, at least for a little while. So, you've got these two faces of starch, right? Heat it up and you get gelatinization. It absorbs water, softens, and thickens things up. Let it cool and you get retrogradation. It pushes water out, firms up, and goes stale. They're really just two sides of the same starchy coin. Okay, theory is great, but let's put this into practice. How does this help us make the perfect bowl of pasta?
This really is the whole game right here. You want to get that gelatinization just right, but you don't want to overdo it. Because if you cook it for too long, those starch granules don't just swell, they burst open, releasing all their sticky starch into the water, and that's how you end up with a gummy, clumpy mess. Nobody wants that.
So how do we nail it? First, use lots of water. This gives the pasta space to move around and cook evenly. And here's the real secret. That cloudy pasta water you're left with, it's liquid gold. It's full of starch, which makes it the perfect thing to help your sauce cling to the noodles. And that al dente texture we're all chasing, that's just what it feels like when the outside of the pasta has gelatinized perfectly, but the very, very center is still a little bit firm. That's starch science you can taste.
Awesome. Now let's see how this same logic applies to a couple of other kitchen favorites, potatoes and bread.
You've probably noticed that not all potatoes cook the same. And yep, it's all about the starch. Your high-starch potatoes, like a good old russet, have these big starch granules that swell up and fall apart really easily. That's what makes them so light and fluffy, absolutely perfect for mashing or baking. But then you have your waxy, low-starch potatoes, like red potatoes or fingerlings. They hold their shape way better, which is exactly why you want them for things like potato salad or for roasting.
Oh, and a huge warning for anyone making mashed potatoes, do not, I repeat, do not overmix them. If you go too crazy with a mixer, you basically destroy all those perfectly swollen starch cells. They burst, release way too much starch, and you end up with something that feels more like glue than fluffy potatoes. Be gentle. And what about bread? Well, in bread, starch is part of a team. Gluten is what creates that chewy, elastic network, right? But it's the starch that does the heavy lifting to create the structure. As the bread bakes, the starch gelatinizes and sets like concrete around that gluten framework, locking in all the air bubbles. Then, as it cools, retrogradation kicks in to give you that firm, satisfying crumb. It's a perfect partnership. So you see, once you get a handle on these two processes,
gelatinization and retrogradation, it's like unlocking a culinary superpower. Let's just quickly run through the main takeaways. Okay, just remember, heat plus water makes starch soften and thicken. That's gelatinization. Cooling makes it firm up and go stale. That's retrogradation. This simple idea helps you cook pasta al dente, pick the perfect potato for your dish, and even understand why your bread has the texture it does. It's all connected.
Seriously, mastering these simple reactions will give you better pasta, fluffier mash, and bread that tastes fresher longer. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know the science, what are you going to do differently next time you step into the kitchen?